On the podcast today, Jeff Timmons, founding member of 98 Degrees, 10 million records sold, 8 top 40 hits, including a number one that was a collab with Mariah Carey. And at the time you guys broke, not a social media account in sight. No Instagram, no Twitter, no YouTube. How do you think things would have been different for you guys had you broke in the modern era, given the demographic you were engaging at the time?
I think we would have. Thank you for the great intro. I mean, that's great. But no, we didn't have any of that stuff. We did have mail, though. So we had a huge mailing list. And for anybody that doesn't know out there, mail is when you make a letter, put it in the post, send it to somebody, they open it up. So we had compiled a big, we did a grassroots thing. So we wrapped the Winnebago with our pictures around it, and nobody knew who we were. We had a song on the radio. We were on Motown at the time, so they didn't want to expose that we were, not an urban group. So we had some other challenges there. So what we did was we went to cheerleading camps all over the country and compiled a physical mailing list. And there was no email at the time. There were no chat rooms. There was no social media. So we literally did a grassroots campaign, and that's what really got us on the map. I mean, we drove up into Canada and went to Backstreet Boys concerts and handed out gear, and got discovered up in Canada actually by Much Music and Music Plus, who put us on. We just powered through everywhere in this Winnebago bus that we drove ourselves. Now, look, that was our version of what goes on today, social media. So I can't imagine where things would have been with us as far as our popularity with social media. I can imagine we would have been exponentially bigger, but at the same time, exponentially scrutinized as well. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. We would have loved to have been, sold 100 million instead of 10 million records, but then we really couldn't have gone anywhere and really had to watch everything we say. And we were young guys at the time, and I don't know that we would have had the capacity to handle that the way we do now as older guys. So
it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. I mean, I really feel for some of these younger artists who are coming up in this era, and everything about them is so exposed, right? And like you just said, that can be a double-edged sword. It can be good, but you can almost learn too much about your favorite artist at times too.
Right. I mean, and back in the day, now you have the biggest A-listers doing commercials, right, or doing skits or hosting podcasts like we're doing right here. Back in the day, that was taboo. It was, if you're not an A-list artist, if you're an A-list artist, you don't do any of that stuff. So it's times have changed. It's about keeping your brand out there. There isn't anything that's really sort of out of the realm or not cool anymore. It's about going out there, making sure you're still relevant because people have so many choices at their disposal.
Right. And do you feel like the mystique that was still something that factored into breaking a big star back when you guys took off and had your heyday, that seems to be gone now? Is that a positive or a negative net overall, do you think?
Well, look, it's a positive that you can gain more fans because they have more access and they can learn more about you. But a negative in that you used to hold the stars in high regard. You'd aspire to be like a celebrity, or they sort of had like this sort of the shininess to them, right? That you wanted to be like, and it gave you sort of an aspiration of that these people were perfect or special in a certain way. And look, from a human standpoint, we're all human beings. We all have our flaws. But there used to be this little thing that made celebrity, special. And now you have anybody that can put a filter on and a bikini or show their muscles on Instagram, and they get 1 million followers and they're a celebrity in their own respect, which is cool. And it's a cottage industry, but it has sort of taken away and blurred the lines of, I think real talent at times. Again, positive and negatives. You want to create your own brand. You don't want to get a real job. You can utilize certain things at your disposal and create an industry for yourself. And kudos to you if you can do that. But again, it sort of blurs the lines with regards to, I think, the talent pool.
Right. And I think that one of the great things about the way things are currently is that you have direct access to the marketplace. If you're an artist or if you're a fitness model or something like that, you can literally access the market without a middleman, without a gatekeeper. And to some degree, that's great. The flip side of that is that we're going to see less massive, culturally aware stars where everybody just knows the name, and we're going to see more fragmentation within the star system. So you're literally going to have some of these people who have 7 million followers, but they're anonymous to the general public. Where when you guys broke, there was a machine behind you, right? Like there was terrestrial radio, there was a media machine behind it. And now that seems to, it's still intact to a degree, but it's it's not what it was 20 years ago, not by a long shot.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, you end up being in this, a big fish in a big pond kind of thing. You know what I mean? There's so much competition out there, and again, you can create an industry for yourself. But if you want to be the biggest star in the world, you need to transcend, I think, both places. I think you can be a star in social media, but you need to end up breaking through and through terrestrial media, whether it be television and still radio. Although radio gets this bad rap, it's still a huge industry and sort of still dictates the cool, that top 9 at 9 or, the hot 100. All of those things and metrics are still very important on kind of dictating who the biggest stars are. So sure,
Right.
you can be a big star on Instagram and make a great living and get endorsements and, get invited to some of the cool events. But, transcending those kinds of things into that mainstream market where you're on the radio and you're featured in a commercial and you're headlining a big tour, that's still a big challenge. And I think the cream still rises to the top there. Certainly, always there's money behind every big sort of brand out there in any sort of way, and that's just the way it is, and it's always been and always will be. But I think that the complications of the competition and kind of sifting through those kinds of things and making yourself known and getting awareness to your brand and getting people to recognize that you have an elite talent or some special gift is a little bit more difficult because everybody's got their own channel nowadays. It's their own broadcast network, so to speak.
Right. And going back to the days when you guys did break, this is really interesting because there was a bubble in the boy band space, right? And although you guys were a band that you put together, you weren't manufactured by a management company or a label, and you were more interested in pursuing the sound of the Four Seasons, the Four Tops, the Temptations, Boys to Men, and you wrote your own music. There were a bunch of things that were unique to you guys, but because you came along at a time when the boy band thing was popular, you got sort of Hollywood typecast into that role. Now, tell me a little bit about the positives and negatives of that connotation.
That's a great question because when we came out, there were no we didn't even know what a boy band was. The last sort of boy band that was manufactured was New Kids on the Block, and we were in junior high when that happened. So when we came out, we modeled ourselves after Boys to Men and those other acts that you alluded to, legendary acts, Motown acts, and of course, All for One was sort of emerging and had come out and had some hits. And we liked Shy, which was an R&B group in the early 90s, and Jodeci, and those guys all influenced us. So we had no idea we were signed to Motown, and we were happy to be signed with those, credible vocal groups. And then we went overseas to try to break for a very small part of time in Europe. And there were these like, carbon copies of these, boy groups where 5, 6 guys were in these groups and singing this very pop candy music. Where we're like, what is going on? And everybody that's interviewing us is calling us a boy band. And we're hearing that these groups have all been put together and there's this audition process. And we're like, no, we're a vocal group. We're like Boys to Men. And we hated it at first. We didn't like it. And then, of course, when we got back to the United States, Backstreet had blown up and NSYNC had followed. And then we were trying to reinvent ourselves because our label was undergoing transitions. And the president of the label said, well, you're just like those guys. I mean, you're 4 white guys that sing pop music with an R&B twist. And so we didn't like that. But then, once we sold tens of millions of records and traveled the world and got to see all this, you had girls following us everywhere and became wildly popular. We certainly did like it after that. So, the gestation of our group, did were we cultivated in the same sort of manner? No, but certainly loved being, famous, and our goals were accomplished by having that sticker put to us. If anybody really wanted to dive into the music and our history, some of which you described, they'll see that there are distinct differences, not that those groups, Backstreet, NSYNC, O-Town, aren't incredibly talented. All of those guys are, and they're great friends of ours. But we felt we were a little bit different, and our story was different. But nowadays, now we're in our mid to late 40s, we embrace the term boy band. Now call us boy band. Every time we get a chance. So
it's like getting carded at the liquor store at this age. It's a compliment at this point.
It makes you weak, right? But it's just a part of the growing process. And look, what it does is tell you. Why you want to take the music serious and take your brand serious. The public's always going to have their own perception. Now, whether or not you want to embrace it is up to you, but go with the flow. You can be serious about your art, but you're ultimately never going to be able to convince the public's perception of you, no matter what, especially when they just make generalizations for the most part. So go along for the ride, be positive about it.
Yeah, it's a little bit like surfing, right? Like you can be a great surfer, but if you don't have the right wave, it doesn't really matter. And you guys were great surfers, so to speak, and from an analogy perspective, but you caught the right wave at the right time, which also gave you the momentum to really show the world your specific craft and your uniqueness within that boy bubble space. Now, the downside to that, though, of course, is that music has this, and music and media tied together has this ritual of creating stars and then abandoning them, right? And the problem, and I think that one of the challenges that comes along with being typecast in the boy band space is when that's the hottest thing in the world and you're riding that wave high, it's a wonderful space to be part of. But when the media suddenly starts to turn and radio formats, because these media companies all own these radio stations and they switch formats all the time. So they don't really care what's popular. They're trying to sell advertising, right? You become collateral damage in that process because now all of the sudden the pop movement, like the hairband movement in the 80s got wiped out by grunge. You guys got wiped out sort of like early 2000s by what was coming next in terms of trends in music.
That's right. And look, and without social media to continue your brand, when they decided, and you're exactly right. When people are like, man, you guys were selling out arenas, and then all of a sudden you weren't cool anymore. I mean, think about that. That's the silliest thing ever. All of a sudden you're not cool overnight. No,
what the fans went away.
No, they didn't go away. But what happened was the media said, hey, this is it. We're sick of this movement. We're tired of it. It's been played out. Let's move on to something else. And when that happens and folks decide the powers to be, that's how powerful the radio conglomerates and TV conglomerates are. When they decided that was it, that was it. Now they'll let a couple of exceptions sneak through, like a Justin Timberlake, or if Nick pivoted to TV and they accepted him there because he was, sort of getting in a new niche there, they'll do it. But traditionally, the rest of us are like, that's it. We're turning our backs on you. I was like, wait a second here. We just did an arena tour. I'm going to do some solo music. And listen, right? I mean, a year later, I couldn't get anybody to even listen to it. They're like, no, it's not cool. I could have had Prince's newest album on wax and sent it to the labels, but they wouldn't even listen to it. So when you're suddenly caught with that, and if you don't know the industry, you actually think you're cool, which I try to study the industry and go, look, we're really not that cool. We do have some coolness to us. We have great fans, but we've got a good machine with our label and our agencies, and media loves us. When everybody turns your back, it's like, wow, where do I go? What do I do? And again, no social media. You have to reinvent yourself in some way. So what I did was go behind the scenes and started writing for commercials and writing for other people and learning how to be a real producer in the studio and go dive into where the business was changing, figure out tech, what was coming next. I mean, that's a scary proposition when you're out there and you're making good money. And, look, we've made good money, but everybody else made way more, right? All the labels, all the business managers, all the team members made way more than the artists. And a lot of people don't know that. So, we made great money. I was well off, but I was like, okay, if this thing doesn't turn around, what am I going to do? And, I didn't get my college degree. So you got to go to work really fast, figuring out what the next niche is, where you fit in, how you can reinvent yourself. Unfortunately, the internet came out. There are opportunities to do some other things, rebrand yourself, and align yourself with some other great people, learn a lot. And unfortunately for me, what folks don't know is I am good in the studio, and I can submit songs or instrumentals for commercials. So that was bringing in some residual income until our fans came back around. There was a demand to see us again as, mostly what were teens and young adults, mostly female, got a little older, had disposable income, wanted the nostalgia of these groups. And, fortunately for us, we have a niche and we were able to come back there. But by that time, we had all created different verticals in our career where we could make an income. But yeah, I mean, it was a tough pill to swallow for a good decade, for a good 10 years there. It was really hard.
Right, and while you were at the top, obviously you've been very open about how you retained being grounded and doing your best to see this more as something that you did as a profession rather than get swallowed up by the hyperbole of superstardom. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're still around and still successful today. But while that is all going on, what kind of disciplines did you have to enact in your life to resist the on the road temptation? Because it must have just been out of this world.
Well, it was really crazy for me because the on the road temptation is actually crazier than folks really think. I mean, there are those wild stories you hear with like Motley Crue, or you'll see these occasionally, very sensationalized story. People who go, "Oh, rock stars," and it happens. Listen, the temptations on the road, especially with me. When we first got famous, I had a young child already, so I had to try to balance that, and it was happening right when we became started getting ultra famous. So really,
Right.
came down to I know you work out. I've always worked out. As much as we work out for the cameras and have big muscles on shirtless shots and all that, I worked out as a discipline to keep my mind and body right. Really got into things like yoga, meditation, reading a ton of books. Not that I didn't indulge and enjoy the road and the spoils that were there, but you can get caught up into that where it will completely destroy your personal life or your focus on your professional life. So you really have to just kind of keep things. And I really appreciate you talking about humility and grounding. I mean, you need that in any profession, but this one, it's real and not real at the same time. And it's sort of an imaginary land where you can buy into the hype, or you can go, well, as much as I'd like to believe I'm the biggest star on the planet, there's someone right behind me, and there was some bunch of people right in front of me. So you got to keep that perspective in place and just go, all right, what I'm going to do while I have this opportunity, which is a 1 in 55 million chance or something crazy like that. You got to go, all right, this window is very small, and how do I stay in it for as long as I can? And how do I maximize all the relationships to apply to future things beyond myself and my group? Now, fortunately, my group's still around. We can still have that fun and enjoy what we've created together. But it's really about all the relationships. That's the relationships are the most important thing, and really the focus on just getting yourself ready for different future endeavors in your life, and making sure that on the way up you treat the people the same way. So when you're coming back down, they remember how you treat them on the way up, and then now that it goes back up, they're going to be there for you again. Those are all the most important things.
Right. And discipline sort of bridge the gap when you can't find the motivation, right? It's like if you've got to get your ass out of bed at 6 a.m. to work out every morning, it's really hard to drink till 3 a.m. the night before.
Right. I mean, it's about keeping that balance. I mean, it's certainly, we love to party like everybody else, but I'm gonna think about that at 3 in the morning. I'm gonna go, all right, well, you can keep having another drink, but at 6 o'clock you get up no matter what. You do it no matter what.
Struggle much with drugs or alcohol?
No, I didn't really struggle with drugs, but we were a big drinking group. We drank a lot of beer on the road. Miller Lite's out like our thing. We'd smash beers, but never to the point. We were always so serious about getting our stuff done that we knew, look, you can't be drunk going into the radio station at 6 a.m. and doing that for 5 years straight. You know what I mean? You have to be on. You go into the radio station at 6 a.m. after you did a show and you got everything cleaned up and on the bus and ready to go. By the time you really settle down and get your 2-3 hours of sleep, you're at a radio station. But for us back in the day, it was a radio station, then an in-store where you sign autographs. Then it's sound check, then it's the show, then it's meet and greets afterwards, and then it's the same thing every day. And you really can't. There really isn't much time for you to do that physically for a long time. And for us, consistently being on the road for 5 years, couldn't do it. I mean, it was impossible.
And the competition was so stiff in that space. You were up against Backstreet Boys. You were up against NSYNC, some of the biggest acts in the world at that time. And I know you guys are all high performers as individuals, so I'm sure you were like, we want to get out there and we want to play on this field, but we also want to win.
Yeah, we wanted to win, and it was mostly because we didn't have a great team for a long time, and it was just the four of us. We were always like overcoming probably more obstacles than normal. There are already a ton of obstacles with getting your team right and labels and all that nonsense, but we had a few other hiccups in there, so it was always the four of us. So we were really trying to win for the four of us. And another part of it is you gotta look good. I mean, first of all, unfortunately, for groups that are pop groups, people look at your image first, even before the music. So you got to be looking good. You can't go in all bloated and tired, and you got to be on top of it and give everybody the best interview you possibly can. Be on top of it. Be sharp. give somebody something that they're excited about, as opposed to going, oh man, you can tell they were messed up in the studio. It was a boring interview, and then the radio guys aren't going to want to have you back, and it's just not a good look. So we try to keep it as efficient with the business as possible while still trying to have fun now and again.
Yeah, it's professionalism. And I'm sure you guys, even though you took it as seriously as you did in the early days, if you could go back in time 25 years with the knowledge that you've acquired and the experiential knowledge that you have now, talk to us a little bit about some things you would have done differently, right even up to your signing, right even up to who you decided to work with. Would you make those same decisions now that you made back then?
I think I wouldn't change a thing. And that sounds cliche, but I think the experience that you have going through all this stuff, if you learn from it, that results in an experience and an emotional intelligence that you can't put a finger on. If it's just a smooth ride, you might not work as hard. You might not be aware when something hits you on the side of the head and then you're done all of a sudden. I think that experience is invaluable. You can't put a price tag on it. So I wouldn't change any of the choices, other than, which is the biggest one, is to enjoy it more. We enjoy all of it. Right now we're older, the pressure's not on, we understand what the business is, and so we enjoy all these moments. We weren't enjoying all those moments back in the day. We certainly had gratitude for the opportunity, but we put so much pressure on ourselves that during that time it was really, really, really hard to enjoy it. So I think that if I would change anything, it would be to enjoy it more, relish the moment, and enjoy it, as opposed to put so much almost impossible, pressure and expectations on yourself. The drive's always good. Try to be the best you can. That's right. Cool. But you gotta find time to take a deep breath and go, wow, I'm on the Tonight Show with Stevie Wonder for the first time. That's pretty cool. Instead of going, wow, I hope we don't screw this up, because if we do, it's the end of our careers. And so much tension and so much pressure. It's almost like, what's the point? So I would change that. Decision-wise, with who we work with, good or bad, the experiences taught us a lot, educated us more than probably most would know. But I think enjoy it.
Yeah, and some of the label deals were just garbage back then, especially when they were making so much money off physical units and that sort of thing. And I'm sure that that's stuff now that you've learned more about and acquired more knowledge about. But at the time, you're four young guys. You've got this opportunity to sign this contract and break through on a world stage. And in those situations, it's very hard to maintain your standards and be too fussy, because there's always a chance that somebody else who's gunning for that same position is going to get it. And so fair enough for you guys for, taking the opportunities that were at hand at the time and making the best of them.
Well, thanks I'm sorry, I got to go, Jim. I got to get on this call for that podcasting. I don't mean to cut this short.
Yeah, it's all good, man.
I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for everything and doing at least the research on the group like you had. Most of the time when we get on, a lot of folks don't know a lot of the things that you mentioned, and if we can influence or be positive in any way to guys that are listening or any artist that is looking to break through, I think it's just have a positive mental attitude and work harder than everybody else, and take advantage of all the things that are available today.
It was great to hear your voice and to have you on, my friend. Thanks for taking the time to do this, and let's catch up again.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate you.
All right. Take care, Jeff.
Thanks,
bye. Yeah, it's good. All right. So Jeff Timmons had to jet last time around. He's back for part 2 of this interview, so we're just going to splice it together and make it all work, and relatively seamless. Jeff, where we left off last time was talking a little bit about what you would do differently if you were able to go back with all the experiential knowledge you have now and redo things. And you talked about how really you wouldn't change anything, because there's real utility in learning lessons, moving forward with that knowledge, and then not making the same mistakes. I think that's a real wise way to look at the trials and tribulations that maybe you faced earlier in your career. But what advice would you give to a new artist coming along in this day and age, given all the experience you gleaned from your first major label deal, your first big tour? What would you impart in terms of wisdom to somebody who's coming along today?
I don't know if it's wisdom or just experience, like you said, and learning from experience. And I guess you can call that wisdom. When I think of wisdom, I think of like somebody that's, ever knowing, right? And has like the secrets to all of the, questions of the universe. But I think the experiences that I got from the business, one was obviously when you're a young guy and you get into the business, you get in to be famous and rich and do music and all these, the things that are on the forefront and the obvious things. And then ultimately you fall in love with the music and that sort of supersede and the performing part of it and the engagement with your fans and all of those things become, and the experiences with the guys in the group, all of those things become a little bit more exciting and meaningful than some of the surface types of things. But, looking back, one of the very, very important things, and I think one of the most difficult things is surrounding yourself with a good team. It's really, really hard to find people that you can surround yourself with that share the same vision and goals and beliefs and have the same drive that you do for your product or your music or your career. Despite what they'll tell you, and despite what you hope that is the case for your team that you're surrounding yourself with, nobody cares about it more than you do, and that's always going to be the case. Once in a while, you'll find someone that your vision aligns with each other, and that's when those resources are invaluable. I mean, I can't think of a time that we ever had a solid team around us. I mean, it was the four guys, and then we had these managers that kind of saw, well, look, we can go get these guys a record deal, and it's an immediate commission, or an agent that goes, yeah, who cares? Let's not really grow the product. They're kind of like Backstreet Boys, but not as big. But let's throw them in all these venues. We know we can make this much money for them, whether they sell tickets or not. It doesn't matter. We're going to get our guarantees. Looking back, I mean, I would have taken more time. And it's kind of a catch-22 because when you're coming up and you've got a million people behind you wanting to be in your place, and you know that they can hop over you at any second with a hit song or a better team, that you don't really have time to sit and go, all right, well, I need to evaluate every single aspect of it, and this manager's good, but this one's better. You go, all right, well, our manager likes us. He can get a sign. Let's go. But I think it's really, really important that you surround yourself with good folks. I mean, that's the first thing I would say. And then, obviously, I think we talked about this last time we were on, enjoy the moment. You got to enjoy the moment. I think you got to work harder than anybody else. Even if you have a song on the radio and you're selling millions of records, if you want to have longevity, look at some of these people that are reinventing themselves and been around throughout the years. They're usually not just the more talented ones, but more likely the harder working ones. And I think a really, really important one, which sounds cliche and maybe corny, which I think is most important out of all of them, is you have to remain humble throughout the process. Because you catch the same people going up that you do going down, and then back up and going down. And it's a small knit business. It's a tight knit group of people that control everything from radio to promotions and used to be retail. And you have to make sure you take care of those people in a really legitimate and sincere type of way. And those folks remember when you come back. And we're not the most talented group in the world. And we've come across groups that have been just filled with talent, but maybe didn't work as hard, maybe didn't, seize the moment to take care of the people that were taking care of them and give them their kudos and recognition for being part of the team. And you just learn from those things, and I think just try to be better. And then lastly, I'd say have faith in yourself, because even when, we were coming up, even family members and your friends, they'll start to look at you and go, you're never going to be able to do that. Or come on, you got to be realistic about this. But if you have that self-belief and that work ethic and that drive, you might not know where the break's going to come from. But if you have that persistence and that faith and belief in yourself and that work ethic, it'll end up materializing for you.
And I think everything you just said dials back to your original point, which is you got to have standards to surround yourself with the best people, and building out a great product, and then attracting the right people who have a track record, vision. You can have honest, candid conversations with them, and not one party is dominating the other one, right? Which is really important. And then, they're going to help you see the best in your career, help you remain present, coach you along to remind you that, hey, listen, we had a setback over here, but here are the good things that came out of it. So you're right, that those members of your nucleus are just so critical. And I think when you're a young artist coming up, it's difficult because you've been doing everything yourself, and you finally have somebody who pays attention to you, and maybe they've got a little bit of a pedigree, and you can quite easily be swept up by the hyperbole and bullshit. And it's painful to watch, but it does seem to happen still time and time again. And it all dials back to the reality that they never maintain their standards, and they never sat down with that person and really forced that manager or agent or label to articulate a vision for the future that aligns with theirs.
And you mentioned a word there that, and it gets thrown around a lot nowadays, and it's you said attracting the right folks, and that's just the case. I mean, when you're coming up, a lot of the things that you're doing are based in fear. I might not get another chance. I might not, have
Right.
another opportunity. So when you live in that sort of fear, and it's a fine line between being confident and cocky, and faith, all of those things, you're one degree away from one version of those things, right? But when you sort of operate and have this sort of background in fear, you're going to attract these people that can sense it, smell it, so to speak, and sort of prey upon you. And you're right, they might have a pedigree or a track record of being with this artist and that artist and another artist, but you'll find 99% of the business are those guys, and that top 2%, you're going to have the guys that really sort of have that longevity as being well known as sort of curating the artist and being partners with the artist or teammates with the artist. But there are a ton of guys that bounce around, and if you bounce around, you bounce around long enough, you're going to be able to have these credits on your track record or be associated with artists, and you can utilize that to say, hey, well, look at these plaques on the wall, and that person just might have been there or been part of a team or just happened to jump on a bandwagon at some point. So it's really, really important to pay attention to the details, of all that stuff, and it gets muddled with your excitement and the enchantment of being a performer, a recording artist, or a star in the business. So it's just about being practical, and that balance of being practical, but also having that dream and vision that nobody expects out of somebody or out of you, that you might expect that of yourself.
We talked a little bit about the rise. I want to talk a little bit about the fall and then the re-rise of you guys. 2003, let's dial it back to that point and time in your lives. You and the band are close. You're like brothers. I mean, some of you are actually brothers. Nick and Jessica have their newlywed show, which is taking off on MTV. You're starting to work on your new solo record. At what point did things start to sort of diverge between the teammates of the nucleus of this band? And at what point did you guys go, you know what, we're going to take a little break? And were there hard feelings around that? Or was it sort of a situation where it was like, you know what, it's just time for all of us to do our own thing for a little while?
I think for us, and look, all artists, no matter how much, whatever degree of success they have, they always have tension with their team and in the business. As you know, it's an extraordinarily hard business. And most businesses are, but the entertainment business has very high highs and super low lows. And the roller coaster ride of it can be taxing. And for us, we were in that pop explosion with the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and Britney and Christina, and Jessica was in there for a minute, and Mandy Moore, and you name it, Sugar Ray and Smash Mouth, and that whole genre was just the golden age, because CDs were still prolific and flying off the shelves, and radio was at the best it's ever been, and concert touring and arenas, and it just was a really interesting time before all the digital age sort of came in and changed the whole paradigm. But for us, we had been consistently working hard for 5-6 years straight with no breaks, right? Which someone would go, hey, that's the luxury and that's the price to pay for being big stars and being in the top, 2% groups of the world at that time. But for us, part of it was the tension of never having quite the great team around us. The label never quite understood what to do with us. We were on an urban label, Motown, and here we were looking at the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, and they're putting them on posters everywhere, and our label was hiding our pictures from everybody, trying to convince them we're an urban group. And there's a lot of frustration there. We're on the same charts, in the same top 5 charts as Backstreet and NSYNC, yet selling a tenth of the records and working 10 times harder. And then meanwhile, we're firing managers, we're hiring managers, and there was no one really to guide us through it. And I think, while we were on top and things were great, music started to change, as we talked about earlier. Radio playlists started to change. The radio program directors were sick of it. They wanted to go more towards rock, more towards hip hop. So they wanted to phase this pop. No matter how much success we're having, no matter how much money we're making, we're just sick of it. We need to change directions and dictate what the cool is going to be. And so for us, I think that we were fried. We were done. And, we were like, hadn't had any breaks. There were 2 or 3 years there. I think we had a total of 7 days off total. I mean, in a couple of years. And so you can imagine the travel, the performances, making sure your team is together, the hirings, the firings, the audits, and trying to find out where our money is and why are we, our manager's driving up in a brand new Hummer and we haven't gotten a paycheck yet, after 4 or 5 top 5 hits. Those things can be quite discouraging, no matter how much you love each other or how much you're for the team and kicking ass and all that stuff. So finally, we were getting pretty tense with everything that was going on. We had a hit with Mariah Carey. It went #1. It was our only #1 hit out of everything. But for us as perfectionists, we're like, well, that's Mariah's song. And when you get to that point where you have a #1 song on Billboard and you can't enjoy it, and you start finding negative things, your mind frame's not correct. And I think that, for us, the deciding factor was we did the Michael Jackson special in New York on September 10th. The next day was September 11th. We were in New York City in 2001 when the towers went down. And we were all like, we had a couple shows left that we had to do on our tour that we were obligated with SFX at the time, which is now Live Nation. And we were like, we need to go home. We don't know what's going on. I had a young baby and another on the way. And had been on the road for a couple of years, and it was just like, well, where are our priorities? Well, the label doesn't quite know what to do with us. Music's changing. We could start to feel like we were being phased out of the radio shows, and all of a sudden, in a matter of 3 years, we went from super cool to maybe not being so cool. Nothing about us changed. It's just it's the perception of the marketing and the fan base and how everything was being dictated. And so we just said, hey, let's take a break. And that break ended up becoming, 11-year break.
So, yeah, you talked a lot about the trends in the industry and how that maybe led to the disillusion of the group. But how was the personal dynamic between you guys? Was it like, we're just not happy anymore, we're just not enjoying this anymore, and it's time for all of us to go our separate ways? And was there any tension behind that dynamic, or was it sort of just like a realization?
Well, that's a really great question. I mean, I think it was a little combination of all of those things. I mean, I think that we were that time we were becoming really, really popular. I mean, we couldn't go anywhere, and at that particular time, when we sold a bunch of records. After we sold 5-6 million records, all these big management companies started swooping in. Big time attorneys, and before it was a hodgepodge of attorneys, and we bounced around with different business managers that had some smaller acts, medium acts, and now all of a sudden we were getting courted by all of these major companies, and people started coming in, and we had different people sort of congregating around us, whispering in our ears and telling different guys they could go do solo things, and this manager might be better for you as an individual. I mean, all of the cliche sort of things that you hear about when you watch, like, I don't know, the Fighting Temptations or any of these movies or TV shows about music groups and how people swoop in to pull you apart. All that stuff happened to us, and for us it was such a grind mentally.
It's such a predatory.
Yeah,
it's such a predatory aspect of this industry where people will because artists require a certain amount of egoic fuel to get back up every time they're knocked down, right? And to persevere against the failure and the rejection. And a lot of industry people identify that and they learn to nurture the positive aspect of ego. But the reality is it's so easy to be predatory. It's so easy to tell the lead singer, you don't need these guys. You could keep all the money. Let's just put out it's your voice on all the records. So let's just put our own album out. We're going to crush it. You see that time and time again. It happens in all formats, by the way. And it's so painful to watch because you get surrounded by these people who just have their own self-interest to serve, and they're not serving the greater good of the actual group.
There's no question about it. And for us, I mean, we weren't little kids. I mean, we weren't teenagers. We were men. We were grown men. I mean, we were, 26-year-old guys, 23, 24, 25, 26-year-old guys. So you think, men in their 20s by now, you can understand that. But look, like you said, when you have to have a certain amount of ego if you want to get up on stage, right? You have to think you're a star. Look, personally, I love getting up on stage, but secretly, I love sitting in here in the studio playing the keys. I would trade that any day of the week because I have this nervousness, this fear when I get up on stage. Every single time, whether we're doing a podcast one-on-one in my house during COVID, or I'm on, in front of a racetrack, the Indy racetrack in front of 110,000 people, or we're on a TV show in front of millions of people, the nervousness never ends. Well, that's part of whatever that process is to get you to get up and do your best work. But, people have an idea of your insecurities, right? They understand that, a lot of times it's very complicated with performers and celebrities, as you know, because they have these insecurities, but they get up on stage and look like they're the most, confident and cocky and best presenters of talent on the planet. But there's that strange insecurity there, and folks that are trained to see that, and the music business and entertainment in general, folks will swoop in on you and say, "All right, this guy's insecure. He's the second lead singer." But he's also more in the front on the posters because he's got them. But let's go in and tell him exactly what he wants to hear, and then we'll say, all right, I can get him this deal, this deal, this deal. Who cares if it works? I can make a quick buck here with the commission, 10, 20%, whatever, and that's it. And they'll pull you apart that way, or drive somebody and say, like you said, you're the lead. Your voice is you don't even need these guys. They're just singing the harmonies. And on stage, you can tell you look at the posters in the audience. You have 3 times as many. With us, the bottom line is we all had our strengths, and that's what made the group successful. No matter what people say, all 4 guys have their own individual fan bases. And no matter what, you usually see when these guys, with the exception of somebody like Justin Timberlake, who's transcended and become a solo artist, and still in sync, you have guys and girls that are Chris Kirkpatrick fans exclusively, or Lance Bass fans, or Joey, or JC's the real singer and he didn't get a break, right? So, collectively, the group still, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And the industry can be so disenfranchised and disillusioning. And again, when you're vulnerable and you're ready to hear what you want to hear, you can get taken for a ride with the whole thing. It's just about being real with yourself. Again, that juggling, I'm a rock star, I need to have that persona, but you got to be realistic and figure out if you want to have longevity,
right,
balance those things out.
And I love what you said. It's the difference too between identifying the difference between someone who tells you what you really need to hear if you want to actually have a long career in this business versus what you really want to hear to serve that short-term ego boost, right? And we're all susceptible to it in all aspects of our life. It's why some of us marry the wrong people. It's why some of us, end up working for the wrong people or working with the wrong people. So it's interesting to hear you talk about it in that dynamic. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the projects you had on the go. You had an album out called Whisper That Way. You started the Men of the Strip program. You also, you really did diversify into different spaces. You started producing some television shows, and it's not like you decided you were going to go on sabbatical in 2004. You really went a full court press into building your own brand out.
Well, I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. I mean, we had made some good money with the group, but not nearly as much as we made everybody else. So, you go, okay, I've got this good chunk of change in the bank, but you're also going, wow, everything I learned in the last 5 years is completely different. And so, there's that fear and anxiety of, trying to make sure that you can take care of your family, pay the bills, stay in what you know is a business. Because I didn't finish college, I didn't get a degree. I couldn't just very well go back and become a lawyer now. I'm in the entertainment business. Now where do I go? Nobody wants to see me. Nobody wants to hear my music. And, look, I had spent a lot of time in the studio watching these great producers like Anders Bagge, who was part of that whole Swedish faction, the kind of the counterpart to Max Martin. And just watching these guys do brilliant things in the studio was a big student of how things worked in the studio. That was my favorite thing out of everything, was how these guys are creating this music in the studio, and try to learn as much as I can. And look, Whisper That Way, I'm glad you know about it. Not a lot of people do, but I produced the album myself. I didn't know my way around the studio. I did it all myself. and certainly didn't have a machine after going from somebody like Universal to not even getting anybody listening to the demos. They wouldn't even listen to it. They're like, you're done. You're not Justin Timberlake. You're not Nick Lachey. And you're not getting a listen. I'm not giving your music a listen. I'm like, what if there's something good there you can give to somebody else? Not a chance. Went to every label, got turned down by every label with the exception of one called Savoy Label Group, which was a jazz label. And, a good friend of mine, Jim Brickman, who is sort of a new age AC star. He's a great guy, a guy from Cleveland, Ohio, sort of from the same town, hard worker, has the same work ethic. He's like, look, I like your style. I think some of the music here is really good. You can't get in front of anybody. Let me put you in front of Strauss Zelnick, and Strauss had run BMG for years, and then had this, jazz label. And this guy, Steve Binding, goes, look, we're not going to give you any money, but we'll put your record out in the stores, and you're going to have to work it yourself. And I was like, all right, sure. And that gave me the opportunity, the cruel opportunity but also invaluable lesson again of learning how radio works and getting up in the morning. And what I did was I noticed that you had to have these guys called independent radio promoters that call the radio stations. The labels consult them, the radio stations consult them. And, we didn't have any money. We had $25,000 to work my record at AC Radio, which is not enough money to do anything with. But I said, hey, it's a chance. Let me see how this works. Met with the indies. They laughed. They were like, yeah, your record's never going to get any ads or get on the charts. And I was like, well, show me how it works. And they're like, here's the list of stations. Here are the MDs, music directors. Here are the program directors. We call them every Tuesday to get your record added. By the way, Boyz II Men's going for ads this week. Mariah and Celine are also going for ads on AC Radio. And by the way, adult contemporary radio only plays what's called these gold records, which are historically already old hits. So they don't traditionally put new songs on the format. But I was stubborn. And I was like, let me try it. So I got up at 5. I'm on the West Coast. I got up at 5 a.m. every Tuesday morning, and called all these stations under 2 fake names, because you can't very well work your record as Jeff Timmons. I can't call the programmers and go, hey, it's Jeff. Can you play my record? So I pretended I was Eddie Furby and Fred Smalls, and called these guys religiously and hounded them and said, well, what do you need? And they'd say, well, we need Jeff to come visit the station, and we need Jeff to do this radio show. We need Jeff to sign 500 CDs and send them to it. My wife likes Johnny Walker Blue. Send her a bottle of that. And so what I did was worked radio. I was able to get my record most added on there several weeks in a row. And then, at some point, and was actually beating Boyz II Men some weeks on the ad charts, and was very proud of it. But the adult contemporary chart is not a very reactive chart. Meaning, when you hear stuff on Top 40 Radio or CHR, the pop stations, what is it? Energy up in Canada is one of them, and used to be in some of these others. Kiss FM now are pretty prolific up there, but back in that day, there weren't very many Kiss stations. But those stations, you hear the record, kids go out and buy the albums, or now download or stream. But adult contemporary is passive. You listen to it in the elevator. Your parents listen to it while they're driving in the car. They're not very well going out and buying a new record. So it was a really good experience. And then I realized, wow, these guys really worked hard to get our records on the radio and spent a lot of money doing it. So good lesson there, and created relationships at retail where SLG didn't have relationships. Was able to get them in Walmart and Target for the first time. Look, I mean, the record ended up shipping 80,000 copies for being an independent. They traditionally were selling 5,000 to 15,000. So proud of it. Do anything that I would like it to do. It didn't sell millions of copies. They put plaques on the wall. But again, invaluable lessons, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great way for you to view that process. I just think it's so valuable for an artist sometimes to take the reins in their own career and really understand who their good service providers have been throughout the years, right? Like once you do the job yourself, then you know who's done a good job versus who's been lackadaisical and lazy, right? And so there's so much value to that. Now, at some point, you get back together with the guys and you all decide, all right, we've done our thing solo for a while. It's time to get back together. Tell us a little bit about that process of getting this group back together.
Well, look, we had talked about it for a number of years, but one of the things that we didn't get a chance to do was actually go on the road and test anything out. It was, yeah, let's get back together. Yeah, great. And we'd go and do Nick and Jessica's Christmas special, talk about it, and then everybody had different things going on in their lives. So we had that going on, and Nick had this going on, and I had, I was a Chippendales host forever and created a mail review of my own, and that had taken up all of my time, and that turned into a TV show. It was always something that was sort of just the wrong timing for everything. Frankly, I just don't think all of us were ready to go do it. We had been so disappointed in the business, although having all these accolades and all these wonderful experiences, felt like we were let down by the business and the teams around us, and we were just scared. But we finally, there was a time we sat down, we met up in Vegas, had some drinks, and we're like, we do love each other. This was a blast. I mean, it gives you that chance to kind of reflect and go, we were lucky. I mean, what are we bitching about? So we decided, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it. We took a chance with this thing called Mixtape Festival, huge festival that was held in Hershey, Pennsylvania yearly. And that year had, LL and LL Cool J and Kelly Clarkson and Backstreet Boys and One Direction and all these huge acts. And we were like, all right, well, this is going to be our comeback. Here's where we'll know. If we go out there and people think we're the funnies and they don't like us anymore, well, cool, it was fun. We can go back and do all the things, all the projects we're working on, go back to our families, our other careers, or maybe they'll respond. Maybe they're ready for us. And it was the best possible experience that could have happened to us. The crowds went crazy. It was like riding a bike, only riding a bike that isn't hobbled by a flat tire. Now the tires are working. We're on the shiniest, coolest bike ever. And it was just cruising. And sometimes, the universe has its own timing for you. And for us, it was, this is how it was supposed to be the whole time. No pressure, fun. And so we're like, let's go on tour. And then, afterwards, we were on the package tour in between Boyz II Men and New Kids, 2 legendary acts and arenas in 49 cities and a lot of sold out shows, and a really good look for us, and nothing but fun, no pressure. Our families were on the road with us, and tour buses again, and not any criminal activity going on with our management teams or any of that stuff. Just a bunch of middle-aged guys going out and having a blast and reliving their youth with fans that are also sharing that experience, which is something that's unmatchable and undescribable, really. And after that, it's just been, ever since, just been a blast. We're just still having fun. During COVID, we're talking about now, let's get back in the studio. We don't have to do a whole album. We can put out a song. We can put out an EP. We can own it. It's not something that we have to say, hey, we need to have a #1 song, or we need to go on a sold-out arena tour. We can craft it the way we like it and the way our fans will indulge us by showing up. So it's really a blessing that we have another chance at this, because rarely do you get one, let alone 2. So the perspective on it, we're humbled by it, and we definitely feel gratitude toward the opportunity that's been afforded to us.
Yeah, nostalgia is a real thing. The world is ready for a new 98 Degrees song. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, and we've been hearing it. And what's really cool about it, and getting back to that relationship thing that we were talking about, is, we visited all these program directors and did free shows for years. And, a lot of times these guys were just coming up as interns, and we were always really respectful to all those guys. And all those guys are running conglomerates of radio stations, or they're, the talent directors for major TV shows and talk shows. And we're like, wow, we're glad we hung out with those guys when nobody else was doing it, because they're there for us. And to your point, certainly we were like, man, we're not going to be able to have a hit on radio. But now those radio guys are like, man, 98 Degrees needs to come out with a song. And these are mainstream formats. And certainly we can always look at Backstreet Boys, who just had a hit, a couple years ago, year and a half ago, which rejuvenated their career as well. And, while we're compared to those guys, we're saying, well, they just did it. We can go ahead and do it too. So we're talking about doing that as well.
You know what else we should do or talk about doing, given all the genre blending that's happening right now and the rise of country music, is look at having you guys collaborate with a major country artist, man. Like, the fans would totally get that.
I mean, we would love it. I mean, look, the obvious choice has been, you do a song with an EDM guy or a dance track and you do the hook. I mean, that's the obvious pair. That makes it cool all of a sudden worldwide, and even in some places that we never broke, like Europe. Our label was always undergoing a transition. So we didn't have a staff in Europe. We broke Southeast Asia and some other parts of the world, but Europe never happened. So the natural progression is go do an EDM dance song and you'll break in Europe. But the other one that would be more gratifying, I think, would be to do a country sort of thing with people, because it's just, for one, it's a different type of music. It has a little bit more heart and soul to it. Not to disparage dance tracks. I mean, there's a ton of talent that goes into those, and those are wildly popular. But I think it would lend it us, since we're balladeers, it's better for us, a better pairing for us, that genre.
You guys would kill it. Jeff, thank you for being so generous with your time. Thank you for being so open and honest and candid with your answers.
I appreciate it, Jim. Like I said, I love the candor and the conversation, and any way I can help any artist coming up and inspire them in any way whatsoever, and just kind of help somebody skip some of the roadblocks or bumps in the road that we had. I'm here. I'm all here for it, and certainly love to run my mouth. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate you having me on a second time.
Truly my pleasure. Thanks again, brother.